By a stony creek in a valley, a black-clad young man was holding a black beetle with a metallic sheen that looked like a cross between a crab and a Hercules beetle. Holding a dagger in his other hand, the young man swiftly cut the still struggling claws off the beetle, revealing white and tender meat. Almost without hesitation, the young man sucked the meat out of the claws as if he were eating a crab, and swallowed it together with larger pieces of tougher meat. Black beetle killed. No beast soul gained. Eat the flesh of the black beetle to gain 0 to 10 geno points randomly. Black beetle flesh eaten. 0 geno points gained. A strange voice sounded in Han Sen's mind, and some data also appeared. Han Sen not evolved. Status none. Lifespan 200 years. Required for evolution 100 geno points. Geno points gained 79. Beast souls gained none. I have received 0 geno points from more than 30 black beetles in a row. I must have eaten too much black beetle flesh to evolve from it further. 0 points. When will I ever finish the first evolution and gain status? Han Sen looked frustrated. Over 100 years ago, science and technology reached a very high level, and humans finally mastered space teleportation technology. Shockingly, when they tried to be teleported, they found that they were neither sent back to the past nor teleported to the future. They didn't even travel from one planet to another. A completely different world lay at the other end of the space teleport channel, a world that human beings could not have imagined. In this world, all scientific and technological means lost their function. A machine gun in this world was not even as useful as a steel knife. Missiles and nuclear weapons would not explode, same as a heap of scrap iron. No mechanical or electronic equipment would work either. All kinds of horrible creatures inhabited this world. Human beings, who used to stand on top of the food chain because of their wisdom and technology, fell to the bottom. But when people killed certain relatively weak creatures and ate their flesh, they were surprised to find that their own bodies changed considerably and evolved quickly in ways that science could not explain. What made people pleasantly surprised was that in this world, with the evolution of the body, their lifespans also increased, which was amazing news to all mankind. In the following century, more and more people entered this world called God's sanctuary, gradually became familiar with the rules of this world, hunted its creatures, and saw their own bodies evolve. The higher the degree of physical evolution, the longer the life. Theoretically, if you could continue evolving, it could be possible to live forever. In this world, science and technology became completely useless. The only things that could help humans were the most primitive fighting skills. Ancient martial arts, which were almost forgotten in modern society, had an unexpected effect here. All kinds of ancient martial arts had been redeveloped, and after more than 100 years of development, new martial arts schools were formed and became prominent. In addition to ancient martial arts, God's sanctuary offered another tool to enhance humans, the beast soul. When killing a creature in God's sanctuary, a person had a chance to obtain the beast soul of the creature. Beast souls had all kinds of forms and appearances. Some could be summoned to fight for men, and some appeared in the form of armor or weapon. In addition, some beast souls could even help humans transform so they could take the shape of terrifying monsters, magical birds flying between heaven and earth, or insects drilling underground. Neither martial arts nor beast souls had anything to do with Han Sen. Han Sen was only able to kill some low-level creatures to eat their flesh and evolve, and he was having a difficult time in God's sanctuary. But the more meat of low-level creatures he ate, the less effective evolution he gained. 3 months in God's sanctuary and he still could not complete a physical evolution. Han Sen had tried to kill some of the more powerful creatures, but even the weakest primitive creature, the copper-toothed beast, almost took his life. He had to rest for nearly a month before returning to God's sanctuary. By this time, Han Sen had eaten all kinds of ordinary creatures around him, and it wouldn't help to eat their flesh anymore. If he didn't risk hunting more advanced creatures, he would never evolve. When he was about to try to kill a copper-toothed beast, Han Sen saw something climbing out from the ripples of the creek. He originally thought it was a black beetle, but immediately noticed something different. All black beetles had black shells, but a bright golden color caught his eye. Han Sen gazed at the creature climbing out of the water. It really was a black beetle, but different from the ordinary ones because of its golden body as big as a basketball. It was like a sculpture carved from gold, and its eyes were crystal clear like gems. It did not even look like a living thing unless observed carefully. Why is this black beetle so strange? Han Sen stared at the golden black beetle. Recently he had killed countless black beetles and knew everything about them. Their vision was poor, but their hearing was very sensitive. As long as he remained still, even in close proximity, a black beetle would not notice his presence. Han Sen stared at the strange beetle, and unexpectedly, it climbed toward him. Without hesitation, when the golden black beetle crawled next to Han Sen, he held down the golden black beetle's shell with one hand and swiftly cut into its fragile joints with the dagger in his other hand. He made 6 clean cuts vertically and horizontally to remove all 6 claws of the beetle. The golden black beetle struggled and flipped over. Taking this opportunity, Han Sen pierced his dagger into a white mark on its belly and turned it sharply. The golden black beetle suddenly stopped moving. Sacred blood creature black beetle killed. Beast soul of sacred blood black beetle gained. Eat the flesh of sacred blood black beetle to gain 0 to 10 geno points randomly. Han Sen was stunned by the sudden voice in his head, and he could hardly believe it was true. Sacred blood creature and sacred blood beast soul, were those even real? The creatures of God's sanctuary were divided into 4 parts: ordinary creatures, primitive creatures, mutant creatures, and sacred blood creatures. Different geno points could be gained by eating flesh of creatures of different types. At that time, there were 4 God's sanctuary phases known to men. With each physical evolution completed, access to the next space would be permitted. The more powerful the geno points used in evolution, the higher the likelihood of surviving in the next space. Sacred blood beast souls were without any doubt the best beast souls. Any sacred blood beast soul could be sold at an enormous price. When Han Sen finally realized what had really happened, he was almost trembling. Holding the dagger to pick open the shell of the black beetle, he filled his mouth with meat as tender as jelly. Flesh of black beetle eaten. 1 sacred geno point gained. Flesh of black beetle eaten. 1 sacred geno point gained. The strange voice continuously sounded in Han Sen's mind and made him feel on top of the world. He gained a total of 7 sacred geno points. 7 sacred geno points were beyond his wildest dreams. With his background, he needed to risk everything even to kill a primitive creature, let alone a sacred blood creature. The shell of the sacred blood black beetle was also precious material, so Han Sen picked up all the claws and stuffed them into his pocket, together with the upper and lower shells. Technically, he could max out and get 10 sacred geno points. He already had 7 from the meat, and the other 3 should be in the shell. If he were to sell the shell, he could probably afford a nice private aircraft and leave Interstellar Alliance with the money he received. On the way back to Steel Armor Castle, everyone was pointing at him, gloating and laughing, and no one would come near him. Everyone in the sanctuary was looking at him as if he were a monster. Normally, when an ordinary person went to the sanctuary, even if he were poor, if his martial skills were not too bad, he could always find some companions and kill a few primitive creatures together, and he would be nowhere near as miserable as Han Sen. However, in the entire Steel Armor Castle, no one was willing or had the courage to have anything to do with Han Sen. More than 3 months ago, Han Sen had entered God's sanctuary for the first time. The moment he stepped outside Steel Armor Shelter, he saw a giant white wolf unicorn standing with its back towards him around the corner of the rampart. Without hesitation, Han Sen grabbed his dagger and fiercely stabbed the unicorn in the ass. This stab turned Han Sen and Qin Shuan together into the biggest laughingstock in Steel Armor Shelter. Yes, the white wolf unicorn was not a beast, but a human like Han Sen himself. She was just transforming using a beast soul. Qin Shuan was also the most powerful woman in Steel Armor Shelter. She was likely to finish her first evolution with sacred geno points and embark on the path of evolution. A new guy stabbing Qin Shuan's rear end became the biggest joke in Steel Armor Shelter. Although no one dared to mention this to Qin Shuan's face, secretly everyone was laughing their asses off. And Ass Freak became Han Sen's well-known nickname in Steel Armor Shelter. Then Qin Shuan declared that whoever spent time with Han Sen would become her enemy. In Steel Armor Shelter, few people could afford to be Qin Shuan's enemy. Even if they could afford it, no one would risk antagonizing Qin Shuan for the sake of a nobody and Ass Freak. That was why Han Sen had such a difficult time, but he didn't really blame Qin Shuan. It was his fault in the first place. He was too nervous the first time he came to God's sanctuary. Plus, he had never seen creatures in his previous world or Transformers before, which all led to the unforgivable mistake. Han Sen was already grateful that Qin Shuan did not kill him in anger. The only lucky thing was that the teleportation into God's sanctuary was always random, and there were no familiar faces in Steel Armor Shelter, so no one knew his real name. Han Sen returned to his room, made a fire, and started boiling the black beetle claws and shells in a pot. Without tools and know-how, he could only use the most primitive methods to process the shells and extract the geno essence. The shell of a sacred blood creature would take more than an hour or 2 to cook, so Han Sen covered the lid and took out the black crystal to take a closer look. Still, no clues whatsoever. Suddenly, Han Sen caught a glimpse of the caged green-scaled beast the size of a civet cat in the corner of his room and suddenly had an idea. Like black beetles, this green-scaled beast was an ordinary creature. Han Sen used to prey on them and bring them back to cook and eat to increase his geno points. But later, green-scaled beasts no longer increased his geno points, so Han Sen didn't eat the last beast and forgot about it. Surprisingly, it was still alive. He grabbed the moribund green-scaled beast from the cage, hesitated for a moment, and was about to feed the black crystal to the beast. To his surprise, seeing the black crystal, the dying green-scaled beast gathered all its strength to stretch out its tongue, roll the black crystal back into its mouth and swallow the whole crystal. There is indeed something magical about the black crystal. Han Sen was stunned and found that the green-scaled beast seemed considerably more lively after swallowing the crystal, its 4 claws scratching and head moving to bite Han Sen's hand, which was on its neck. Han Sen threw the green-scaled beast back into the cage and carefully watched it. The beast, which hadn't fed for days, completely recovered its vitality, thrashing and scratching wildly in the cage, just like it had when it was first caught. Han Sen sat across from the cage and watched the movements of the green-scaled beast. He had a guess, and if he was right, he might have obtained something incredible, something more exciting than a sacred blood creature. But Han Sen was afraid he was wrong, so he could only stare at the green-scaled beast anxiously, hoping to see the change that he desired. Han Sen suddenly heard iron breaking from the cage of the green-scaled beast. He quickly turned around and saw the green-scaled beast had bitten off an iron bar of the cage and stretched out his head from the inside. Its light green scales had now completely turned a dark green color. Its teeth had become sharp and the tips of its 4 claws were like iron hooks. The beast was about to come out of the cage. Han Sen was pleasantly surprised and pulled out the dagger from his waist. He rushed to the front of the cage and stabbed the dagger into the lower belly of the green-scaled beast. With a turn of the dagger, the green-scaled beast stopped struggling. Primitive creature green-scaled beast killed. No beast soul gained. Eat the flesh of the primitive green-scaled beast to gain 0 to 10 points randomly. The strange voice sounded in Han Sen's mind and left him stunned. Primitive green-scaled beast. Primitive creature. So the crystal can really make these creatures evolve. Han Sen was overwhelmed with joy and did not know how to react. After a long time, he suddenly cut open the green-scaled beast with the dagger and uncovered the crystal as big as a pigeon egg. Taking no heed of the blood on it, he kissed the crystal twice and then wiped it clean, holding it in his hands like it was a great treasure. The crystal was really the reason the black beetle became a sacred blood creature. If the green-scaled beast had continued to evolve, could it have become a sacred blood creature too? Han Sen almost dared not think about it, because it was just too amazing. He was so excited that his hands were trembling while holding the crystal. He bit his tongue and cried out of pain so as to know that it really was not a dream. After remaining excited for quite a while, Han Sen carefully put the crystal away, gobbled up the shell broth, and gained another sacred geno point, bringing his geno point count to 8. Han Sen realized that he had gained a sacred blood beast soul of a black beetle when he killed the golden black beetle, and he quickly accessed his profile. Han Sen, not evolved. Status, none. Lifespan, 200 years. Requirements for evolution, 100 geno points. Geno points gained, 79 geno points, 8 sacred geno points. Beast soul gained, sacred blood black beetle. Type of sacred blood black beetle's beast soul, armor. What would the armor of sacred blood black beetle's beast soul look like? Before Han Sen finished the thought, a golden shadow shot out of thin air, looking exactly like the golden black beetle. The golden black beetle flew to Han Sen's chest, turned into a golden liquid and started to cover his whole body. In the blink of an eye, Han Sen's whole body, together with his hair, was all wrapped up. The streamlined gold armor was full of power and impact, and covered his whole body as if it were a suit of gothic medieval armor instilled with improved aerodynamics. It looked just like a piece of art. The whole suit of armor felt full of power and speed, making Han Sen look slender and majestic, as if his whole body were full of explosive power. With shining metallic luster, the armor was gorgeous and had a solid texture. At first glance, it was even somewhat like the gold cloth worn by golden saints. The difference between the gold cloth and the beast's soul armor was that the armor covered the head and body completely, with only a few gaps in the joints where different pieces overlapped, just like the black beetle itself, which was the only weakness of the beast's soul armor. Han Sen moved around in the armor and there was no feeling of heaviness or clumsiness. Instead, he felt that his body had become a little lighter and full of energy. Indeed, this was armor from a sacred blood beast soul. It is way more gorgeous than the ones from primitive beast souls that I often have seen at Steel Armor Shelter. Han Sen felt ecstatic. He used to envy people in armor of primitive beast souls and had never thought he would get a suit of a sacred blood beast soul one day. 8 Group President Zhao Yilong completed the 3rd evolution, entered 4th God's Sanctuary, then became the 83rd human in history to enter 4th God's Sanctuary. His lifespan has reached 500 years and he has gained the status of demigod. The prodigy from Raykot Galaxy, Lange, entered 2nd God's Sanctuary with 100 mutation genopoints. His lifespan has reached 300 years and he has gained the status of Evolver. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Hemingway, killed a demigod creature star of the ocean yesterday, and was the first to accomplish this feat. According to authoritative experts, in 10 years someone will complete the 4th evolution for the first time and advance into 5th God's Sanctuary. Han Sen had just teleported from the steel armor shelter, and the news was playing on a virtual screen. Evolver, Surpasser, and Demigod. With the Black Crystal, I will be able to do all that, and go even farther. Han Sen shook his fist, stepped away from the teleport station, and took the maglev train home. Before he went into the yard, Han Sen heard a harsh female voice. Luo Sulan, do you want to take the old house of the Hans? This house was our parents, and my 2 elder brothers and I each own a part. Now my eldest brother has passed. We won't bully you, since you are a widow, and will leave you his share. But if you want to take everything, we will never agree. That's right. The voice of a middle-aged man chimed in. The old house has always been the inheritance of our parents. All of us have rights to it, and you can't keep it for yourselves. Your family has lived here for more than 20 years, so you have already taken advantage of us in a big way. It is time to divide the inheritance. My brother has said it, a soft-pitched male voice continued. You lived in the old house for more than 20 years. We will not collect the rent, but this old house is our inheritance and has to be divided. A young woman's voice could be heard saying, we have an estimate from a lawyer, and this old house is now worth more than 3 million. We are 3 households, so we should get $1 million each. You can either give each of us $1 million and own this old house outright, or sell the house, and then we all split the money. We are okay with either option you choose. Exactly, now that our eldest brother is gone, we won't bully his widow and kids. You can give us money or sell the house, as you like, the harsh first voice began again. Brother and sister, there is no need to force me. You know our situation. We don't have 2 million, a woman said sadly. Then put the house up for sale, the harsh woman immediately said. Where would we live without a house? Han Sen just graduated and Han Yan is about to go to school, the sad woman said. Sister-in-law, this is not reasonable. How are you the only one with troubles? Your kids Han Sen and Han Yan are only enrolled in integrated compulsory education, while my Han Hao goes to a private school. His tuition gives me gray hair every year. Sister, you are right. We are all having a hard time and everyone needs money. Why don't we just sell the house? We could all take some, and you could afford Han Yan's education, said the effeminate voice. Anyway, you either give us money or sell the house. Your choice, the young woman said coldly. Outside the house, Han Sen became furious as he listened. He pushed the door open and saw his mother shedding tears while holding his sister, Han Yan. The 5-year-old girl curled up in the arms of her mother, her big eyes full of fear. Next to them, 2 men and 2 women were all smiling indifferently. How dare you come here and ask for the old house? Han Sen pointed to the fierce-looking fat woman and exclaimed in anger. Aunt, you used to be an accountant in the company and brought about tens of millions in bad debts. Did my dad not help you after you begged him? Han Sen, what nonsense. Who caused bad debts? Stop lying. The skinny guy with the effeminate voice cried, pointing to Han Sen. Uncle, you embezzled the company's public funds to invest and lost a few million. Han Sen pointed to the skinny guy. Did you not come to my home and get on your knees to beg my dad for help? And you, uncle, you owed so many gambling debts that you were almost forced to commit suicide. Who helped you when you were almost beaten to death? Who saved your life? Han Sen pointed to the fat, middle-aged man. Starry Group wanted to acquire our family business. If my dad didn't represent all of you and then had a falling out with Starry Group, would he have died in such a shady way? Han Sen clenched his teeth, looking at the 4. But you skipped my dad's funeral and sold the company to Starry Group upon his death. Did you give us any of the money you got from selling the company? Also, who paid for your houses when you got married? Were those houses any cheaper than this old house? Did you take care of your parents for a single day when they were alive? How dare you come here to ask for a share of the old house? Stop it. Your father only did what he wanted to do. The company belonged to my father, and we all have shares. He can't decide for us. And surely, we can spend the money of the company. Uncle Han Lei said brazenly. That's true. Your father was a dictator, and we are only getting our own money back. They started to accuse Han Sen's late father. Han Sen was shaking with anger and felt wronged for his father. When his father took over the company, it was only a small business worth 1 or 2 million. He spent so much effort for the company to bloom and had to look after his family and make up for their mistakes. A few times the company was on the brink of bankruptcy due to liquidity problems, and he even died for the company. After his death, however, his wife and children were bullied by the relatives that he used to help. When Han Sen's father was alive, he always said that they were family and there's no need to argue. And what an irony it has become now. If they truly needed the money and had difficulties, Han Sen would just agree to give it. But all the private aircrafts they piloted here were worth more than $1 million. And they at least got 10 million from selling the company, which all fell into their pockets, and nothing was given to Han Sen's family. It was simply impossible that they didn't even have $1 million. After making a fuss at Han Sen's home, Han Yumei and Han Lei gave his family an ultimatum. They had to come up with the money or sell the house in 1 month. Otherwise they would file a lawsuit. I'm so useless that I can't even keep the house. Luo Sulan held Han Yan, her face covered with tears. Luo Sulan was a gentle lady. When Han Sen's father was still alive, she was treated like a princess. She didn't even know how to sweep the floor, let alone do other chores. Han Sen knew how difficult it was for her to raise his sister and him after his father passed away. Don't worry, Mom. I am here even though Dad isn't. I will not let them take away our house. You take a rest and I'll consult Uncle Zhang on the matter. Han Sen called a friend of his father's, Mr. Zhang. He was the lawyer who used to work in their family business as legal counsel. Hi, Uncle Zhang. This is Sen. Is your back any better? I have a legal matter that I want to ask you about. So, Han Sen looked a little pale when he hung up. He had confirmed that his relative told the truth. They do have rights to a part of the house. And if they really did go to court, the verdict would be close to what they've asked for, to either pay them money or sell the house. Sen, what did Mr. Zhang say? Luo Sulan asked Han Sen, looking at him nervously. Don't you worry, Mom. I have checked with Uncle Zhang and there is a solution. You just make sure Yan is okay, and I'll take care of this. The house will not be taken away by anyone, Han Sen said with a smile. That's good. That's great. Luo Sulan breathed a sigh of relief. Now Han Sen had no power or influence. The only solution was to come up with $2 million in a month if he wanted to keep the house. Although he felt it was unfair, without power there was nothing left to do. 2 million Levo dollars was an enormous amount for a young man who just finished integrated compulsory education. In the past, Han Sen couldn't have earned 2 million in a year, let alone in a month. But now everything was different. In fact, if he had not already cooked the shell of the sacred blood black beetle, the shell alone would be worth 1 or 2 million. Even without the shell, he still had the black crystal that could make creatures evolve. As long as he had that, 2 million was nothing. He must first catch a creature before he could use the crystal to make it evolve and trade the flesh of the evolved creature for money. Now that Han Sen owned a suit of sacred blood beast soul armor, he could up his game and start to hunt primitive creatures instead of ordinary creatures. Primitive creatures weren't worth much, and he would waste a day's time waiting for an ordinary creature to evolve into a primitive one. To come up with 2 million, Han Sen would need to sell at least a mutant creature. Primitive creatures were usually seen a dozen kilometers from steel armor shelter. Han Sen had not dared to go that far before, but now he has had his armor. This time, his goal was no longer a copper-toothed beast, the weakest among all primitive creatures, but the swift mantis often spotted in Zephyr Valley. Although a primitive creature, a swift mantis had a fragile body and could easily be killed by a normal alloy dagger if stabbed in a vulnerable spot. However, a swift mantis was so fast that ordinary people couldn't keep up with it, and its pair of hacksaw-like forelegs could easily split human bones. Once hit by the forelegs, a person would be crippled, if not killed. So few humans would go to hunt this creature. For Han Sen, however, the swift mantis was the best option. It was in the end only a primitive creature, and there was no way it could cut open his sacred blood beast soul armor. If he couldn't be hurt by the mantis, surely he could kill it. The most important thing was that with claws and wings cut off, a swift mantis could no longer fight back but could still live. This way, Han Sen could easily take it back, keep it in his room, and use the black crystal to make it evolve into a mutant creature before he sold its flesh. Of course, if he were able to kill a few swift mantises and got lucky, he might even gain a beast soul. The beast soul of a swift mantis was in the shape of a swift jagged blade, which was a long dagger, a type of weapon Han Sen had mastered. Although the swift jagged blade was only a primitive beast soul weapon, it was the sharpest of all primitive weapons, and could even compare to some mutant beast soul weapons. Because of the danger of hunting swift mantises, few would go to Zephyr Valley, and even fewer had obtained a swift jagged blade. If the rare weapon were to be sold, it would cost more than 2 million. So, if Hansen could score a beast soul of a swift mantis, there would be no need to sell mutant creature flesh anymore. The closer Hansen got to Zephyr Valley, the fewer people he could see. Around the valley, there was no human activity at all. Hansen did not dare to go too deep, so he found a hidden place and summoned the sacred blood black beetle beast soul to cover himself in the golden armor. Taking a deep breath, he sneaked towards Zephyr Valley. Hansen did not dare to go too fast. The valley was covered with trees and wild grass as tall as a man. As the trees and grass swung with the wind, it was difficult to spot any swift mantis that might be hiding there. Even momentary carelessness could lead to broken bones from a mantis attack. Suddenly, Hansen saw something green, about a foot long, sticking to the grass like a leaf. If he didn't look closely, he would have thought it was part of the grass and would have never imagined it to be a swift mantis that could split a human skull with a single blow. Its pair of sickle-like, jagged forelegs were even longer than its body. Dark green in color, the forelegs were covered in a metal sheen and were nothing like its fragile body. The rigidity of the forelegs was definitely comparable to the most advanced alpha alloy. Hansen was lucky that he found the swift mantis before it saw him. Moving towards it, he calculated the nearest he could get to it before being noticed by the swift mantis. When he was about 6 feet away from the swift mantis, Hansen did not dare to go any farther, fearing he might lose the opportunity to attack by stealth. Tightly holding the dagger in his hand, Hansen rushed out from the grass and cut at the swift mantis' waist in a fast and ruthless strike. But Hansen had still underestimated the speed and responsiveness of the swift mantis. It had noticed his presence the moment he rushed out. All of a sudden, it rose into the air, gliding with wings spread towards Hansen in a truly swift move. Its forelegs had cut him in the head before he could even react. Hansen subconsciously stepped back in shock, yet the mantis' forelegs still hit his head. With a sound of metal clashing, Hansen felt only slight discomfort, as if his head were hit by a stone, and there was not even a scratch on the sacred blood beast soul armor. Filled with ecstasy, Hansen seized the opportunity to cut into the slim waist of the swift mantis in front of him with a fierce stab. The swift mantis was cut into 2 halves, green mantis blood splashing him wet all over. Hansen didn't care at all and listened to the strange voice in his head blissfully. Primitive creature swift mantis killed. No beast soul gained. Eat the swift mantis to gain 0 to 10 primitive geno points randomly. Touching his helmet where the swift mantis cut to feel it was still smooth, Hansen thought to himself in excitement, "Haha, the armor is everything. With my armor, I could kill whatever I want to kill and no one could ever hurt me. I wouldn't even fear mutant creatures." Hansen suddenly gained courage and stopped hiding. He marched to Zephyr Valley and alerted several swift mantises to attack, but they couldn't hurt him at all by cutting his armor. Hansen took the opportunity to kill them all, each with 1 stab. Primitive creature swift mantis killed. No beast soul gained. Eat the swift mantis to gain 0 to 10 points randomly. Primitive creature swift mantis killed. The voice continuously sounded in his mind, adding to his thrill. He stabbed his way through the valley and killed more 20 mantises in succession.